Welcome. I'm Silvio Baldessera, your host and founder of NORR 18 years ago. The 2024 NORR series has been about the future of architecture and engineering with a focus on 5 areas: sustainability, net zero, carbon neutral, livability of cities, climate change. The 10 guest speakers influenced us this year as follows. Carol Ross Barney changed the urban environment of Chicago with the design of Riverwalk. MDAS architects reinvented Penn Station 2 in a sustainability study center in New York City. Neil McLaughlin drew from the past arts and craft in his future designs. Mies van der Rohe taught us that less is more. Patrick Schumacher introduced us to technonism as a future movement. Susan Lamont taught us about Grenfell, how the greed of industry and government resulted in the loss of 72 lives, a lesson for the future. Carlo Molino taught us of the possibilities in design world of the architect. Buckminster Fuller taught us about Spaceship Earth and asked Lord Norman Foster, how much does your building weigh? Today, we have our final session with Michael Ben-Eli, who will give us an understanding of sustainability. Our NORR series has recorded all of our sessions, and they're available on NORR YouTube. I want to welcome all of our 14 worldwide offices, including all of our invited guests. Next slide. In particular, I also want to welcome all of the schools of architecture worldwide that have been joining us for the NORR series. Buckminster Fuller is one of the great futurists of the past. The Dymaxion world map was patented by Buckminster Fuller in 1943. It is the only flat map of the entire surface of the world, revealing our planet as one island in the ocean without any visible distortion or continent separation. Fuller said, the Dymaxion world map serves as a tool for communication and collaboration between the nations. Fuller believed, given a way to visualize the whole planet with greater accuracy, we, humans, will be better equipped to address the challenges as we face a future on board Spaceship Earth. Fuller's Spaceship Earth encapsulated concerns that resources are limited and must be managed. Fuller explored principles of energy and material efficiency in fields of architecture and engineering design. He defined wealth in terms of a particular kind of knowledge that includes technological ability to protect, nurture, and support and accommodate all growth needs of life. He was convinced that the right knowledge combined with the right amount of recyclable resources already extracted from the earth has reached the particular level such that competition from essential resources is not necessary. On the contrary, he believed cooperation an essential survival strategy. Fuller counseled us in the 50s onward till the end of his life, and I quote, "We are called to be architects and engineers of the future and not its victims." Buckminster Fuller published Operating Manual for Starship Earth in 1969, a must-read for anyone who is concerned about the sustainability of our planet. But today we have Michael Ben-Eli of Sustainability Lab as our guest speaker. Michael Ben-Ali established the Sustainability Lab in order to develop and demonstrate groundbreaking approaches to sustainability practices, expand prospects, and producing positive life-affirming impacts on people and ecosystems in all parts of the world. Michael has focused his work primarily on issues related to sustainability and sustainable development, and has been working to help inspire leaders in business, government, community, and youth accelerate a peaceful transition to the sustainability future. Michael is the author of widely acclaimed 5 core sustainability principles. He has been the driving force behind the development of the lab's flagship project, Project Wadi Atir, and is leading the development of the lab as the worldwide network for advanced research, development, and education centers based at different ecological zones. In 2016, Michael was introduced into the International Green Industry Hall of Fame and a Lifetime Achievement Award. He received the Cosmic Fishing Award in 2019 and advanced Buckminster Fuller's design science strategies in helping humanity better understand complex connections with natural systems. In 2022, he received the Environmental Hero Award by the International My Hero Project. Welcome today, Michael Ben-Eli.
Thank you, Silvio. Thank you, everyone who joined today. And I'm particularly happy to actually follow your last session that was about Fuller, since as you will learn perhaps in this presentation, everything that I'll be talking about has some connection with him and with my own long association with him. So what I'd like to try and do today is kind of cover 3 or integrate 3 different topics or related topics. One, I'd like to talk a little bit about the lab and introduce the lab and its work. I then want to go into talking a little bit about the concept of sustainability itself and look for a deeper meaning of it that I hope will resonate well. And at the end, I'll have another section where we will explore a case, if you like, where the work of the lab and the principles that we developed are showcased in a particular project on the ground with people and so on. So first about the lab itself. The lab is basically a US-based research, development, and educational organization, not for profit. It was established in 2008 to advance the global sustainability agenda. It's being developed as a vehicle for introducing sustainability innovations. And since its inception, we have 16, 17 years now, it has been able to achieve some significant and impactful result. And I'll be talking about some of those as we go on. Why the lab? Why getting the lab? The idea here is actually quite simple to follow. The cumulative impact of human activities now threatens every vital component of the biosphere, including the well-being of our own species. And the sustainability challenges that we face, the challenges of the transition to a better way of doing things are entirely unprecedented. There are really no sustainability experts in my view. There's been no experience. Nobody had the experience of managing, regulating, whatever is the right word, the planet with nearly 10 billion people in a more or less harmonious, peaceful, and abundant way. So there's no cookbook, there's no recipe that you can just blindly follow. And if there is no such a recipe book that you can follow, you need to experiment. And many of the organizations that are supposedly dealing with sustainability issues are not really built for radical experimentation, if you like. So where do you experiment? You experiment in a lab. And what does the planet needs now? This is thinking about, we are talking now around 2008. What does the planet need now? A global laboratory for sustainability innovations. And nothing like this was done. We said, why not do it? Let's establish a lab. So, of course, it was a very naive, almost Don Quixotic, if you like, idea, because no resources, nothing to show other than this ambitious vision, if you like. So hence the whole idea, and the idea for the lab is to really engage in kind of bold experimentation with new ways of thinking and acting and doing. And so the basic idea was of a lab that will be driven by sound science, by creative experimentation and groundbreaking innovation, not involved in advocacy, not involved in politics, really follow Bucky idea that you need to focus on design, and the design will be superior if in fact it is driven by a deep understanding of scientific issues, really daring and creative experimentation, and trying to produce the kind of innovation that the issues require. The mission of the lab, you heard the echo of it in Silvio's introduction. I'll read it out loud. The mission is to act as a catalyst for accelerating the transition of world society and its economy to a sustainable basis by researching, developing, and demonstrating groundbreaking approaches to sustainability practices. And here, very important, expanding prospects and producing positive, life-affirming impacts on people and ecosystem in all parts of the world, impacting both ecosystems and humans and their communities. The lab DNA, if you like, what we like to call our signature approach, really comprises three basic elements: a holistic system thinking and a system-based design approach, a pioneering theory of change, and a rigorous definition of sustainability, along with the 5 core sustainability principles. I tried to capture those here, if you like. Those 3 components comprise the conceptual, if you like, underpinning of the work of the lab. And the first, of course, is a system-oriented design strategy. We like to take a whole system view of the issues that we tackle, meaning understanding what are the key variables that are involved and how they interact. Very, very important, because that in those interactions give you an understanding of what are the effective leverage points for change. I emphasize here the idea of a system-oriented design. The idea of design here is super important. Usually we try to approach issues as problems. And when you do that, you very often fall into the trap of the epistemology of that problem, and it's very difficult to get out of. And this is an idea, the design approach is something that I certainly learned from Fuller, and that is where the difference lies. Because when you take the design approach, you don't start with a problem, but rather you start with defining an end state, a desired condition that you want to achieve, and then cast back to understand what are the requirements, what do you need in order to achieve that state? What do you need in terms of resources? What do you need in terms of knowledge? What do you need in terms of institutional structures, and so on? The next element is that interesting theory of change. We'll talk about it again. We'll encounter it a little later again. That basically makes a distinction between 2 kinds of change. First order change, changes that you make in a system while the system basically still stays the same. Or second order change, where you bring around a complete transformation. The system is no longer what it was, if you will. It shifts, it evolved. it became something broader, more inclusive, more something else. And then finally, the definition of sustainability, which I'll talk about in a little later, and the 5 core principles that we derived from it. And these basically, this is the framework that is behind everything we do at the lab, both development projects and educational programs. We try to develop those, design those as manifestations of achieving or seeking the achievement of those principles. And behind this, of course, is a desire to bring about a profound, really second order change. And this is a symbol of that. We'll return to this one as well, because you see the pool of water where the duck is swimming on the left is in a place that only less than 10 years ago looked like the picture on the bottom right. And now it looks like the picture on the top left, a real deep transformation. And so the primary areas that we like to focus on are 4. One is actual development of project to not just deal with the theory and the words, but actually showcase projects on the ground that involves humans, communities, resources, soil, you name it. We want to be able to showcase technology innovations, another area that we want that we are working on. And of course, the whole idea of education, how to use not only our projects themselves as vehicles for education of those who are involved, but also have a number of education programs, I'll refer to them later, that are also transformative in nature, if you will. The 4th area that is of great interest to us, which we haven't yet worked in, but it's in the plans, is a whole notion which I'll refer to here as green economy. How to begin to experiment, to try out financial instruments that really recognize effectively what economists call externalities. All those super important issues that we usually leave out of economic calculations. And so the idea behind the lab is twofold: to build over time a portfolio of showcase development projects that demonstrates the signature approach, if you like, which I do believe is quite unique. And at the same time, develop the lab as a network of activity centers around the world that map onto particular ecozones. This is because I believe that eco-differentiation is much more effective than the prevailing distinctions that are made at the moment, which is between developed and underdeveloped countries, south and north, poor and rich, and so forth. I think a desert is a desert everywhere, and it presents humans with the same challenges regardless of their conditions. So heretofore, we were able to establish 4 such centers of activities. Usually, we do this in relation to an advanced kind of academic and research institution. The first was with the Blaustein Institute of Desert Research of the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev in Israel, in order to deal with sustainability issues in drylands and deserts. The second was Earth University in Costa Rica, in order to focus on issues of humid and dry tropics. Recently, we created a new alignment with the Royal University of Bhutan to address issues of alpine, high altitude sustainability issues. And last but not least, the University of Las Palmas in the Gran Canaries in Spain, where we have very intensive work at the moment. So behind this is all this idea we want to affect change. And over time, we were able to really have some significant impacts. And I want to emphasize, I didn't say it in the beginning, I said that when I started that since our inception, we were able to have some significant impacts, but I missed the idea that this is with very meager resources. And this is something we're quite proud of. So we have quite a bit in impact. When you look at communities, for example, we were able to make some big contributions by promoting a productive relationship between marginal communities in different countries and the governments and other sectors of society, sometimes where there is a complete separation and very little engagement. We were able to empower marginalized communities and replace apathy and helplessness with hope and action moving forward. We fostered in all the projects, but in some in particular, and we'll talk about it a little later, the whole idea of gender equality by challenging some very deep socio-cultural norms. And of course, we tried to stimulate sustainability entrepreneurship by some of the particular educational program, but also the development program itself that usually comprise some economic development activity as well. On the ecosystem, we talked about this. We tried to showcase approaches to ecosystem restorations, like the one that I mentioned before, turning the desert into green, if you like, to demonstrate the waste to resource approach, turning what we usually think of as waste, which is precious resources in most cases, into something that is usable and functional, and to kind of again showcase best practices in whole system design. We also have been able to have, I think, quite an impact through our educational program mostly on providing transformative educational experiences that inspire a young generation of future leaders. This is usually those who will have to lead the world tomorrow, and we try to give them a deeper understanding both of system thinking and the whole sustainability issue and so forth. We are trying to deliver educational tools, or rather to deliver tools through education that are needed to catalyze game-changing sustainability changes. We kind of offer the platform for continuous ethical, technical, and economic discourse and sharing of learning, and encourage, as I mentioned before, proactive entrepreneurship in the different projects. We've also managed to have, I think, significant impact on the partners and those who are involved who are involved in supporting labs projects. I think I mentioned that already, the idea of foster collaboration of diverse section of society around a particular issue, around a particular sustainability issue, around a particular project, to bring together parts of sectors of society who not usually cooperate well. And this, of course, include the private and public partnerships, and other components that may not usually act together spontaneously. And of course, we basically, I think, have been able also to empower our own funder and collaborating individuals and institutions that work with us in expanding and developing their involvement with the sustainability agenda. The projects and programs that we are involved with, the first is the lab's flagship project, if you like, Project Wadi Atir, was alluded to before in the Negev Desert. This is a project with the Bedouin community in the Negev, and it combines indigenous tradition and experience with the desert and desert living with modern day science and technology, really leveraging that innate experience with powerful tools, modern tools. We are trying to demonstrate effective approach to sustainable agriculture in arid zones. We'll be able to look at that project in more detail because I'll use it as a case, if you like, at the end of our presentation today. And of course, showcase significant innovations as part of the project in community development, in economic opportunity, in green technologies, and ecosystem restoration. A project which is a very interesting one, but very demanding in Costa Rica. We call it Project Transition, Proyecto Transición. It's a project with a community of undocumented Nicaraguan refugees, basically, illegal in Costa Rica. It's a large community that really lives in the worst condition that you can think of. And the idea here is to transform this reality of persistence poverty that includes all the things that come with abject poverty, crime, drugs, prostitutions, and so forth, to really transform it into a positive and productive opportunity, productive both socially and economically. And of course, to demonstrate here a proactive, replicable, and scalable model for addressing the vexing issues of migrant groups in Costa Rica, which are multiplying very quickly, but also in other parts of the world. I think the issues of such migrant community is becoming an important one, the demanding one, and we hope with this project to demonstrate a model of a sound approach to issues that involve this kind of communities. Another project which is now taking a lot of energy, it's very demanding. I'm not sure whether we'll end up with this. It's a project that in Arizona, here in the United States, that deals with remediation of abandoned gold mines on a site called Glisson. What we tried to do here is to demonstrate some experimental, innovative approaches to dealing with toxicity of the tailings and so forth by using basically bioremediation approaches. And we tried to again engage a local indigenous community as at the heart of this project, and really develop after the thing is cleaned. It's a beautiful, beautiful site, not far from the border with Mexico, is how to develop it as for public purpose, if you like, as a regional community center, a technology innovation demonstration site, ecotourism destination, education and art programs, and so on. A project that is moving very slowly, but will be pushing there aggressively, is with it's a pilot development project with a Maasai community at the Olgulului Ranch in southern Kenya. This is a community, large community, at the border with Tanzania, near the Amboseli National Park. And the idea here, the unique thing, it's a Maasai community. One unique thing about it is that the community owns itself. It owns a huge tract of land. It's about 250,000 hectares. And it's a degraded dryland, basically, that can really be a fantastic opportunity to scale up our approach and experiments in the Negev Desert. And of course, if we do that, that will also involve other elements of developing economic opportunities, develop the capacity of the community, and all the other thing that usually goes with integrating all those dimensions in a project that we try to tackle. A research project that we completed last year, and we are now expanding it, is basically developing a better understanding about the interplay of tourism and the carrying capacity in the Canary Islands. This is very important in the Canary Islands, like in many other places around the world. Tourism has been exploding with all the adverse impacts that tourism is bringing. And so what we try to do here is to look at, get a better understanding of how different tourist policies, if you like, by simulations, different tourist policies or different policies for development of tourism would impact the requirement of resources will the demand on resources will impact the environment where this is taking place and so forth. The case of the Canaries is very interesting because this is a society that basically lived on traditional agriculture for most of its history until the 90s, where tourism began to develop very quickly. So just to give you an idea what's happening there, it's 7 islands, the Canaries, 7 islands, about 2 million people altogether. In 1965, when tourism started to take off, there were 15,000 tourists during the year, during 1965. In 2019, the year before the corona, there were 16 million, 16 million. And it's largely low cost, mass tourism from Europe that is really devastating everything in sight. You can imagine the huge demand on resources, local resources, the huge impact on the very fragile ecosystem, the impact on the local economy, the impact on the tradition and society, and so forth. So we are expanding this project now in order to work directly with the government and the leadership of developing policy about tourism in order to avert, this is specifically in the island of La Palma that is not developed too far yet, to see how they can control better what will happen in the future. One of our educational program we call the Global Sustainability Fellows Program. It's really an incredible, it's a transformative graduate level education initiative that kind of is designed to inspire, prepare, mobilize the next generation of sustainability leaders. We usually promote here collaborative, multidisciplinary approaches to addressing sustainability issues. We usually take a group, it's a summer program basically. We usually take a group of about 20 youngsters. Out of the 20, they represent 18 different countries, different cultures, and all different sectors, from art and science to architecture, engineering, poetry, whatever, social sciences, medicine, and so on. And they usually are exposed to a very intensive theoretical kind of material, but then have to do work together to work on some local issues where we try to do it in different parts of the world, which is an inspiration in its own right, the change of environment. We also have a sustainability prize program. This is a program that is now, I just came back from Costa Rica last week where we gave the prize for the 15th year. This is a prize that goes to the graduation project. This project, the graduation projects are real project, not on paper only, to the graduation paper project that best demonstrates the application of the lab's sustainability principles. As I said, last week was the prize. Actually, very interesting. The prize was given to a team of 3, a young lady from Ethiopia, a young man from Kenya, and a young man from Zimbabwe. And they've been working on developing a cricket farm in order to harvest crickets to produce proteins for human consumption. And we just got a renewal for this program for the next 5 years. And at the same time, we just launched a very similar program. Only 2 weeks ago, I was there in Bhutan with the Royal University of Bhutan, where we got some funding for starting that program for 5 years. And I hope that that will allow us to identify an important sustainability issue in Bhutan that we can turn into a real project. Last but not least, in 2021, we started what we call this kind of webinar conversation series, exploring the sustainability challenge, where we do a conversation with opinion leaders in various aspects of sustainability, whether it's climate change, biodiversity, governance, you name it. We are still continuing with this. I don't think we'll go with this forever. We have already about 26 or 27 sessions behind us. I think we'll probably stop at 30 and try to package this material that is now available. All the videos are available on the lab's website and YouTube channel. So where are we now? Basically, what next? I mentioned before that in pursuit of our mission, the lab has been able to demonstrate substantial results despite a modest infrastructure and budget. We were kind of regard the years since we launched the lab in 2008 as the proof of concept phase, if you like. And that phase kind of confirmed that the underlying concept is sound, it's viable, and it's valid. I can see this not only from the impacts that we have, but from the reactions that we are getting now from many people around the world. And so we are ready to embark on the next chapter of the lab's development and build on past experiences and successes and refine methods, increase professional capacity, and expand our impacts. And so the long-term vision is to let the kind of emerge, the lab emerge as a preeminent global resource for transformative sustainability initiative. Think about it as the future global MIT of sustainability, if you will. And we kind of focusing now on the next 3 years to produce some achievable, practical, objective results, consolidating a good foundation to take the next leap, which I hope will come in 3 or 4 years, and continue to develop the lab as an inspiring hub for innovation and socioeconomic development in technology, green financing, and enlightened conscious raising ethical approach. So basically, we are following a three-pronged approach here to strengthen the lab embryonic infrastructure, to try and develop and expand the current portfolio of projects, and to boost the educational offering. So having talked so much about the lab, and of course, in taking that step forward, we are calling on people and groups and others to join us if they are inspired by what we're doing. This leads us to putting a little bit of a more theoretical focus, perhaps, on the whole question, on the concept of sustainability itself. Now, perhaps in seeking to produce a better understanding of what the thing really is about. Now, you'll all agree with me, I'm sure, that the term sustainability itself has been so overused, misused, and abused that it's all but lost its meaning. It's the term that you have to use with almost everything you say these days because it's the politically correct thing. So you find the use everywhere. If you go to the development agencies, for example, you find talk about sustainable financing or sustainable projects, and you say to yourself, "Oh my God, they're really doing projects to demonstrate what sustainability means. They are developing instruments to deal with those issues." But of course, that's not the case. Sustainable financing usually is the term used to the question of whether loans that are given out will be repaid. Sustainable projects is usually used as the term for projects that are supported and then they are able to sustain themselves. So in all those, you hear in talking about is the foreign policy sustainable? I saw an ad in an airport not long ago about an accountant that was advertising sustainable retirement plans. Some time ago, this is something I love. I repeat it every time. In a yoga class that I was, a young lady who was doing the class was encouraging us to have sustainable asanas to keep the position a long time. So in all of those cases, the term sustainability is used grammatically in a correct way, indicating continuation over time, but it has very little to do with all the issues of the relationships between humanity and the planet, the biosphere, and what we are doing to it. So when I talk about sustainability today, I talk about it first and foremost in the context of the whole planet, the integrity and health of the biosphere and the well-being of humanity. Now, if you take a system view of anything, you have to start with a very simple strategy, and that is understanding what are the variables that are involved and what kind of interactions defines their mutual what kind of interaction define their interactions. Anyway, in the context of sustainability, the two main variables that if you don't deal with them, you're not dealing with the concept of sustainability are population and carrying capacity. Population and the carrying capacity of its environment. And it can be any population, any environment. It can be amoeba in a petri dish. It can be wildebeest in a savanna, like you see here, and it can be humans on the planet. And the point about this interaction, and so again, I want to emphasize in the case of sustainability, population and the carrying capacity are the key variables that you need to deal with. And of course, these are still hot potatoes in the international community, so to speak, because any attempt to talk about population that is still growing more rapidly in developing countries is seen as some form of new imperialism. And of course, the OECD countries are not too eager to talk about carrying capacity because this is where the overconsumption and overindulgence takes place. So the two main elements are out of the table right away. And that's why we end with the very lukewarm prevailing definition that came out of the UN and was accepted and signed up by everyone at the Rio conference in 1982, and that is a sustainable development is development that takes care of current needs without jeopardizing the needs of future generation. So in the face of it, it looks very nice, very positive, very sensible. No one will say I'm against future generations, but when you take a deeper look at it, you'll realize it's very difficult to operationalize. You can't you can't compute economic utility values for future generations. Future generations are not with us around the table to decide what's good for them. And there are some other weaknesses in that definition, but it's an easy one for everyone to agree on. All the heads of state sign up or down on it, go back home, and business is as usual. So keep this in mind. Population and carrying capacity are so important to that definition. And the interaction, in this case, the interaction between population and the carrying capacity of the environment is of a very particular, it's a very particular structure. It's not a linear interaction, it's a circular interaction. It's a circular interaction whereby both variables continuously define one another. I mean, obviously, environments and their carrying capacity define what kind of population is possible in the first place. And populations over time keep modifying the carrying capacity or the environment itself, which in turns open up new possibilities or closes possibilities and so forth. And basically, the whole history of the biosphere is a history of such circular interactions. You're all familiar with the fact that millions eons ago, the composition of gases in the atmosphere would not make possible the life as we know it today, but eons of microorganisms modifying slowly that composition allowed for the next level to emerge and the next and so on. So there are many factors that affect that interaction, of course. Now, focus your view on human population. The population size is a big factor. The volume and intensity of its activities is a big factor. If it's more active or less active, of course, has a huge impact on demands of resources and things like this. The composition of the environment, of course, is critical. And all of those are physical items, but there are many other items that are factors in this interaction that are not physical in nature. They are therefore more difficult to deal with. And they are things like the prevailing culture and the worldview, the basic values, the available technology, the political and economic organization, and so on. But when you go back to the interaction, let me just check something here. When you go back to that interaction, you have the vector of activity, population affect the carrying capacity. This is kind of looking at that circular diagram that you saw before in a higher resolution level. So first, I'll just say that population dynamics is not a topic that is totally understood by people who deal with demographers and so forth. It's a complex system in its own right that depends on interactions of fertility rates, birth rates, growth rate, death rates, many other elements that are not completely understood. And it affects the carrying capacity through obviously through its activities. And the two main channels of affecting here are that are basically metabolic, if you like, in demand, is the demand of resources. We feed on the environment, essentially, the demand on resources. And the other is, of course, the generation of byproducts that have to be absorbed by the environment. Every activity generates byproducts, whether it's emissions or heat or whatever, and those have to be. So the whole idea that you need to look at is whether the system is in equilibrium from the viewpoint of not exceeding demand on resources beyond the ability of that environment to regenerate them, and not exceeding the ability of the environment to absorb your byproducts. And of course, these are two areas where we are out of balance. We'll talk back about the activity vector beyond those two that, as I mentioned, are basically metabolic. They're physical in nature as we progress. So based on that kind of conceptioning, the definition that we at the lab offer to the term sustainability reads as follows. Sustainability is a dynamic equilibrium, you understand the equilibrium that has to keep in place, but it's a dynamic in the sense that it's not a static position that you reach once and for all. It's modified by the conditions. The technology, for example, can expand carrying capacity and so forth. So dynamic equilibrium in the process of interaction between a population and the carrying capacity of its environment, such that the population develops to express its full potential. We don't know where evolution is taking us, and we don't want to put any limitations there other than one important one. The population develop to express its full potential without producing irreversible adverse effects on the carrying capacity of the environment upon which it depends. So you realize that definition has a number of advantages. It's completely operationalizable because all the key variables that I mentioned in it are measurable. And it mimics the circularity of the concept itself. It kind of turns upon itself, as you can see if you observe it. And so it is this equilibrium that is now threatened, and not threatened. We are out of equilibrium, and this is because of two major obvious factors. One is the unprecedented increase in population. It's very interesting to look at that because when you look at history, if you look 15,000 years back or so, humanity rarely even hugged the billion level mark. And then in a period of about 300, 200 and something years since the Industrial Revolution, it jumped from just under a billion to what we have today, 8.5 and still growing. Now, I'm well aware that there is a great deal of evidence around the world that population growth is slowing. But look at this way. The fact that it slows has only to do with the tip of this thing. It only has to do with the angle. How steep is the angle of the tip of that thing? The point is that the big shift in the relationship between humans and the planet has already occurred just by the sheer numbers. And the other thing that is very important because of that, and it is something that I'll mention before, that most of the instruments that we have in place today, economic concepts, governance concept, the way governments work, I mean, all the major institutional arrangements that are supposed to mediate our lives and well-beings are basically entities that were evolved in this reality here, where the whole relationship between humans and the planets was very, very different. And this is why they're so useless in many ways. And so this dramatic shift can obtain what I think is a very powerful visual side. You see, this is, we talked about the numbers, now we're talking about the intensity of the activity. Remember, that's an important factor on the equilibrium that we're talking about. So here you see, you're very familiar with this night satellite vision of Earth. If you took that picture 200 years ago, you'll have just a dark frame. And here you have, in this case, Europe, basically, at night. All these lights, all this intensity of light demonstrates basically, in my view, a level of activity. And what's more, remember that all these lights are still produced largely by burning fossil fuels. So this is, in fact, a dramatic picture of the way that we are burning the planet up. And what is happening, of course, is that we are out of equilibrium on those two levels that we talked about earlier. We are consuming resources way beyond regenerative capacity. As you can see, for example, with the shrinking forest covers and the destruction of fisheries everywhere. And of course, we are overwhelming the sinks by creating waste product, whether by emissions or all the plastics everywhere that go way beyond the absorption capacity of the environment. And this is why the current path is simply not sustainable. We really need to find a way out. And being unsustainable or being out of equilibrium, I mean the biosphere. The biosphere being out of equilibrium shows numerous signs of stress. Things like the ozone depletion, the climate change, the loss of biodiversity, all those nice things that we are, including incidentally, growing social unrest and income disparities and so forth. All of those that are sometimes referred to as environmental problems, these are not environmental problems. This is a total misnomer. These are symptoms of a system that is, it's a symptoms of disease, if you like. It's a symptom of a system that is under severe stress. And this is how that stress is manifest. So the system is out of balance. It's showing all those signs of stress. And those issues that we look at the environmental problem again should be seen more and more as symptoms. But let's get back to this resolution level here and focus on the activity, the central vector of activities. We talked about the two metabolic channels, the demand on resources and generation of byproducts. Here, we have a whole lot which are physical in nature, I emphasize those. On that vector of activities that affect the equilibrium that we're talking about, there are many non-physical factors that are not metabolic in nature. And these other non-physical factors I mentioned already before include things like the prevailing culture, the institutional structures, capabilities, the economic system that is being used, the economic model that is entertained, the societal issues, the political factors, and so forth. All of those affect, in one way or another, that equilibrium that we are trying to reach. And when you look at that, when you try to resolve that vector into its many components, there are basically thousands and thousands of things that are relevant. And I thought, after really kind of tabulating and trying to understand many of those, I felt that it was useful to cluster them into 5 key domains. The material domain, the first, which constitute the basis for regulating the flow of material and energy, matter and energy that underlies existence in the first place. The economic domain that provide a guiding framework for defining, creating, and managing wealth. What is it that we consider of value? The life domain that asks for basically, people will call that one environmental. I don't like to use the term environment because that's part of the syndrome, cultural syndrome of separation. We are here, the environment are there. In fact, we are part of the environment like any other tree or cockroach, if you like. And therefore, I call it the life domain, which has to do, provide the basis for behavior in relation to other species. Then you've got the social domain that provides the basis for social interactions. And last but not least, the spiritual or value domain that identifies the necessary attitudinal value orientation and provides the basics for ethics. Unfortunately, we will not have each one of those domains. From each one of those domain, there is derived a particular principle, and those principles guide that framework that I talked about earlier. We can. I see that we are kind of really going on with time, so we won't have enough time to go into them in details. But just think about that. There's the 5 domains, each one with the principles. So you have a set of 5 principles that is systemic in nature itself, meaning that if you're serious about dealing with sustainability issues, you cannot pick one domain or one principle. You have to integrate all of them in every issue that you simultaneously in every issue that you want to deal with. And so why principles? If you want to fly and create some kind of a vehicle that will take you flying, you better understand the principles of aerodynamics. And if you are serious about establishing the concept of sustainability as the organizing principle on the planet, you better have some feeling of what are the principles that underlies that concept. And the principles are expressed as imperatives, not as prohibitions. And each relate to each one, as it relates to the economic, social, and so forth domains, basically prescribes the conditions that must be met to maintain the viability of the whole or to achieve that state. And I will not talk much about it. I'll just give you a flavor for the principles without commenting on why, because we are really running out of time now. The first is the material domain. The first principles basically says contain entropy. You cannot avoid entropy, but you can manage it. Contain entropy and ensure that the flow of resources through and within the economy is as nearly non-declining as permitted by natural law. Of course, it's important to look at that principle in light of the fact that our current industrial civilization is super entropic and very wasteful. in everything that it does, not only in the industrial production, but the emphasis on war economy and all the rest. The second, the economic domains and the economic principle says adopt an appropriate accounting system fully aligned with the planet's ecological processes and reflecting true biospheric accounting to guide the economy. At the moment, we have an economy that is completely divorced. Most economic activities is completely divorced from the physical processes that basically support it, which is a total absurd. There are many other absurds in our economic system. For example, the accounting system that allows us in many cases to count consumption as income. It's something that if you do with your company, you'll be put in jail. But this is how we run the world economy, basically. The domain of life, here you are very well of the fact that we have not been that we've not been very good neighbor, and that the huge success of humanity as a species on the planet comes at the expense of many other species, some of which have not been discovered yet, as well as habitats. And the domain of life says, the principle here says, ensure that the essential diversity of all form of life in the biosphere is maintained. Issues of disasters from climate change can be dealt with enormous resources. Once you lose a gene pool, you lose it. And therefore, it's very important to preserve that diversity. And that concept of diversity is essential. What we are learning from the system sciences is that the stability, the viability, the long-range viability of complex system is provided by their internal variety, by their internal diversity, by their very complexity itself. And what we are doing here, we are taking a very complex, how should I say, a very complex web of life and monoculturally, which is, of course, very dangerous. The social domain, the fourth principle, very obvious, the golden rule, if you like, maximize degrees of freedom and potential self-realization of all humans without any individual or group adversely affecting others. And finally, the spiritual domain, very, very important. That's the value, the underlying value, what drives you. All the others have to do basically with techniques, how you do things. This asks the question, why you do it in the first place. And this is perhaps a little more poetic expression, recognize the seamless dynamic continuum of mystery, wisdom, love, energy, and matter that links the outer reaches of the cosmos. Remember that we are made of stardust. Most of the heavy metals in your body and so forth produced by supernova explosions light years away and eons away, that links the outer reaches of the cosmos with our own solar system, the planet and the biosphere, including all humans, with our internal metabolic system and their externalized technology extension, embody these recognitions in a universal ethics that guides human behavior. We're obviously quite far from that. Now, here I want to introduce another concept which is very important. The concept of sustainability is usually looked at as a goal, something to pursue. Hence the United Nations so-called Millennium Sustainable Development Goals. But is it really a goal? Is that the way to look at it? Here I turn to cybernetics and the system sciences again, where in the 40s, Nobel winner, the father of cybernetics, and his colleague wrote a very obscure paper that I'm sure not many people ever seen, that was called Behavior, Purpose, and Teleology. And what they were saying was something fantastically important, and that is that any output produced by any system, any output, meaning the observable behavior of any system, is basically mediated by an internal structure. Think about this. Behavior, any observable behavior, is being mediated by an internal structure. Now, it sounds almost over. What it tells you is that if you think about how many times when we try to reform, to modify a behavior, we focus on the behavior, not on the structure. The structure is sometimes invisible, incidentally, but we focus on the behavior, whereas you will never change behavior if you keep the structures in place. As long as the same structure that produce that behavior are there, you'll keep getting the same behavior. What it means is very important for us because it means that sustainability is not a goal, it's a system state. It's a state that is produced by a particular kind of structure. And the current unsustainable trajectory that we are on is driven by all the structures and underlying mechanism of our current industrial civilization. So change is of the essence. And what kind of change? Obviously, second order change. First order change will not survive. This is a syndrome that you'll see everywhere, where major transformation is actually approached from with the tools of first order change. Climate change is a very good example for that. The issue of climate change is how to get out of fossil fuel, full stop, not how to reduce emissions and in a small percentage. So for the last 50 years, the world community has been involved in a fight, an argument, and who did what to whom, and who owes what to whom, and therefore how much money should go there and there, completely leaving the main engine, and that is the concept: how can we accelerate? How can produce a moon project to get out of fossil fuels in a hurry? And so basically, reordering human affairs will require a major transformation in the values that we have, the underlying culture, the structure of the economy, the way financial markets work, the availability, priority of technology, and so on. And the reason why it's so difficult, and the reason why, in spite of all the growing awareness and more discussion and more conferences and more meetings, the needle moves very, very slowly, is because the underlying structure is tremendously powerful in that its main component are interactive in a basically self-reinforcing, continuously self-defining ways. And these are exactly the kind of thing that are very difficult to re-engineer. But if we don't engineer that, if we don't reinvent each one of those key components, the structure of the economy, the financial market, all the things that I mentioned before, and how they interact, we will stay in the same place that we are. And of course, the objective is how to foster a well-functioning alignment between individuals, society, the economy, and the regenerative capacity of the planet's life-supporting system. So we are in that choice here between continuous deterioration, which is where we are now and what we are going to witness in the next few years. Again, in spite of all the talk and all the stuff, there's a train that runs straight into a wall with nothing to stop it. Or the choice between that continued deterioration or taking sustainability. This is clearly not the image of the world that we'd like to see. And the thing is, the paradox is that at the end of the day, this is in our hands, in our understanding, in our commitment, and our values, and our determination to get the things on the right footing. So what we are called to for is to really rethink everything from the beginning. You can't take anything for granted. Most of the things that we operate in terms of businesses, governments, financial markets, you name it, what we believe, what we don't believe, are things that belong to the past. They need to be refreshed. They need to be reinvented in order to move us forward. I'm afraid that I'm out of time, although the last section is about the project that I wanted to talk about. But what I'll do it in 5 minutes, and then I'll turn back to you, Silvio. This is a project with a Bedouin community, the Negev Desert in Israel. This is a site when we started working with it. Basically, in that project, we tried to demonstrate the application of those 5 principles and integrate all those 5 domains in one development project. You see that there are many beautiful projects around the world today that innovate in many important aspects of sustainability. But when you look at them, you'll see that they are mostly issue or sector specific. So the project about energy, or project about water, or project about community. Here we're saying you have to integrate all of those dimensions if you want to really have an impact. So we try to deal with some major community innovations. I won't refer to those economic opportunities that generate income for that community. A whole lot of interesting kind of dairy product that we produce now. How do you say, medicinal plant. The desert is home to many very potent medicinal plants that comprise the heart of the Bedouin health system. So this fellow on the right bottom, Ali Al-Awashli, is a local sheikh, a local healer who devoted his life to the Bedouin understanding and knowledge of the desert plants. And we are cultivating those plants and producing a range of health-related products. Another women-led program is to do with returning indigenous vegetables to home gardens. We are producing, remember, we have all these beautiful flowering herbs. So we're producing great honey that is being sold, a nice olive grove that produces oil. We have a store on the site now that sells all the products. We are very active in various markets. The project attracted a tremendous amount of interest around the world, and there's always been a stream of visitors from everywhere. Very strong educational program at the heart. We have this. Remember, this is at the heart of the desert site that you saw before, a community center. This is how it looks today. We are operating an agricultural school now in collaboration with the Ministry of Education that teaches thousands of kids every week, and they come and take part in the project and the activities there. Interestingly enough, with all the craziness in that particular neighborhood of the last year, this became an island of peace and tranquility, and a source of interaction between Jewish and Bedouin community. Here, this picture was taken, the pictures were taken only about a month ago, where we had to harvest the olives. And these are kids, families with kids who came both from Jewish and Arab communities to the project in order to do the harvesting together. Some technologies, again, trying to follow the resource waste to resource approach. I'm sorry that I'm running to it like this. We're trying to get it into totally free from fossil fuel, experiments with biogas, producing at the top left, reconstructed wetland to purify water, producing compost. And recently we installed a very nice facility to demonstrate that was developed by the Technion in Israel to demonstrate producing water from the air. Now this is being experimented in a number of places around the world, but here it's very effective even in desert environments where the amount of moisture in there is very little. Last but not least, I just want you to see this. This is a site that when we started, satellite pictures in 2008. This is how it looked. These are the patterns of erosions that are there. We decided to deal with combating desertification, if you like, in a combination of massive planting and catching rainwater. We kind of raised about 4,000 or 5,000 trees and shrubs for 5 years in greenhouses. In the meantime, we created those low impact, low earth mounds to stop runoff. We moved the trees when they were right under irrigation, drip irrigation when they started. That's the first time, as you see here, that water was kept on the ground. Usually the water doesn't, because of the nature of the soil, it creates this pattern of erosion that never stays in place, but produces huge flash floods somewhere else. And it's a lot of water, as you can see. This is just harvesting rainwater now. And the whole ecology changed very quickly. We also introduced different edibles to show the potential there. And this is what happened like within 9 months, a year after we moved the thing to there. This grass, incidentally, is 2 meters high, and it was not seeded, was not planted. This is nature doing what it does best when you leave it alone. And here I was particularly interested in the issue of biodiversity. This is a site that had no life. I mean, basically a couple of scorpions here and there, or a raven if there was a dead animal. But the whole flora immediately changed on the ground. And with the flowers, all those insects started appearing, all the cross-pollinating. And of course, following the insects, all those birds that you never saw on that place. We counted now about 56 different species of bird. Many of them nest on the site. Many are birds that fly from Africa to Europe and back, and they use the site as a rejuvenating kind of resting for a few weeks, feeding and resting before they go on. And with the birds, all kinds of other forms of life begin to proliferate, including high mammals, predators. And this is basically how the site looks now. Again, remember, no fertilizers, no seeding, nothing other than the thing itself doing what it is designed to do. Here is another, and of course, this is best for the animals who can now go out in the pastures and produce. And I end up with this duck again. Why? Because when we started this project, everyone I talked to and tried to get support would tell me this is crazy, it will never happen. This is the 17th year now, incidentally. It will never happen. This is crazy. You can never do it. Impossible, impossible as the duck swimming on this every year in the winter in those pools of water at Project Gladiator. This is a group, the team that is now running the project. You see that at least half of them are women. This is not something that is taken for granted in that community. Thank you very much. Sorry that I took so long. Silvio, back to you.
Michael, thank you very much. That was just a fantastic presentation. Sorry you had to rush through the last one, but thank you for sharing, especially the last session there. Do you have a final slide for me, please?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask our guest to join us, the Honorable Elizabeth Dowdeswell. Elizabeth is the longest serving Lieutenant Governor of Ontario from 2014 to 2023. She carried out thousands of constitutional and ceremonial duties and encouraged Ontarians to think deeply about their role as residents of the province and as global citizens. She became known as Ontario's storyteller-in-chief. Building a resilient and sustainable society was the focus of her mandate. Safeguarding democracy was her passion. Ms. Dowdeswell's public service career has spanned provincial, federal, and international borders and transcended disciplinary lines, engaging the public in complex issues of social significance. She contributed globally as Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of the United Nations Environmental Program. She was the founding president and CEO of Nuclear Waste Management Organization, and later the president and CEO of the Council of Canadian Academias. She has served on the board of the Canadian and international corporate and nonprofit organizations. Ms. Dowdeswell is an officer of the Order of Canada, a member of the Order of Ontario, and is recipient of numerous distinctions and fellowships. She holds 11 honorary doctorates. Welcome, Elizabeth, to this session with Michael Ben-Eli. Please come on screen to join us.
Thank you very much, Silvio, and thank you so much, as always, to Michael. I've been following his work for many decades now, and we've had the opportunity to work together to try and implement some of his challenging ideas, challenging because he always challenges the conventional wisdom, but also because he continues to inspire. So I have a number of questions for Michael, and indeed perhaps for Silvio as well. But let me just say that my own personal learning journey about sustainability began in preparation for that major conference that Michael mentioned, the United Nations Earth Summit in 1992. And that was at the time thought to be such an amazing event because the world community actually embraced the concept of sustainable development. And they did so with an understanding at that time that it was a way of integrating our desire to provide fairness and opportunity through economic development, that we could steward the world's resources to deal with the equilibrium, as Michael described it, between population and carrying capacity, and to develop a sense of social cohesion. In fact, it was often called the politics of hope at the time. There were, of course, a number of treaties and institutions that were established at the time. But what happened in the decades to follow was that the promise of Rio was never fully recognized or realized. To be charitable, some of us called it a work in progress. Others called it tinkering in the margins. And so later on, a couple of decades later, a to-do list for the world was developed, and that was called the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 interrelated goals, as Michael mentioned. I think what happened was that the original intent was found not to be implementable, at least at any kind of speed. And so the thought was that if you develop very specific goals in very specific domains, that you might be able to make more progress. And in fact, when I came back to Canada and looked specifically in a non-political way about what I was hearing from the citizens of this province, they didn't use the word sustainability, but the very things they wanted to achieve in the future for their families was very much a sustainable future. And so what I discovered was that in fact, I think by thinking by fragmenting the effort into very specific domains, we in fact did away with the very fundamental concept of looking at things in a holistic and systemic way. So I have a couple of questions immediately for Michael, and one is the issue of whether in fact we have the capacity as human beings to really look at things in a systemic and holistic way, or whether our governance systems and the way in which we negotiate around the world leads us in an opposite direction. The second part of that question is I'd be interested in your experience in the case studies that you have been working on as to which of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals have been easier to achieve, easier to work on than others. And I'll tell you the experience of 10 years of listening to Ontarians. What I've discovered is that they gravitate very quickly to the environmental goals. They think they've got something to say about climate change, about biodiversity, about clean water, and so forth. But it's the ones around the social dimension that they have the hardest. It's so difficult for them to wrap their arms around that, whether it's alleviating poverty, for example, that's much more difficult. So I would rely on your experience in your case studies to say, are there some of those goals that are more readily attainable than others without doing away with the concept of being holistic and systemic? And then I'll come back to a couple of other questions, but perhaps I can just start with that major one because it's so fundamental to your way of thinking.
Let me start with the first question, and that is whether humans have the capacity at all to think holistically and so on. I deeply believe that the answer is yes, that humans are basically born comprehensivist. We have the most incredible equipment, and not the brain, the mind, whose sole function, as Bucky was talking about at length, incidentally, Silvio, to integrate, to look at totalities and understand totalities. What is happening is from the day a baby is born, he's placed under a regime of fragmentation. The whole educational system doesn't encourage holistic system. The whole structure of the disciplines. The cosmos doesn't have physics and chemistry and biology and this and that. It's a fragmentation that is produced artificially. And that fragmentation becomes so powerful that by the time you are reaching adulthood, you've been totally compromised of your ability to think holistically. And this is why the system sciences are so important. And they're still lacking in academia. How many places do they teach system thinking? So without system thinking, you cannot address complex problems. The idea, this is the heart of the problem. The idea that came up with the Greeks and the approach to science, that the way to acquire knowledge is by taking a complexity and breaking it into parts, into smaller parts. And that means individuals specializing in smaller and smaller parts to the point that they don't have a language anymore to talk about the totality. So again, my answer to that is that we have the potential as humans. That's what we are. This is why we're there in the first place. We're there as a fantastically powerful anti-entropic force to integrate and create. And instead, we are destroying and so on. The other has to do with that whole issue of the goals and why Rio didn't succeed. I was just talking about this. Rio didn't succeed because everyone was focusing on the goal and celebrating that they agree about the goal, but thinking that that goal can be achieved if all the existing mechanisms that drive the economy, that drive the way the world works, will stay in place. So there's no surprise to me that if you don't deal with redesign of the internal structure, you'll end up with the same result, no matter how many declarations and how many things are being signed and so forth. And the global sustainability, the UN sustainability goals are the biggest acronym of this all. Because what's happening, it's a basically nice fragmented wish links of nice things to have if you could, without any understanding of the interplay between them, the interaction between them, and without any reference to limitations under which you could or could not achieve them. So there is this fundamental paradox there, that if we were to reach 2030, and we could put a V next to each one of the 17 goals, and we will reach it doing things as we're doing today. Remember, the use of fossil fuels is only accelerated. All the data from last year shows that the tonnage, not only of emissions, but the tonnage of use of fossil fuels has never been higher. We are still going on that trajectory. So if we were to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goal in the same way that we're doing things today, we will be in a much bigger sustainability holes. There'll be nothing to celebrate if you do that. So the combination of fragmentation, conceptual fragmentation about the nature and misunderstanding of the nature of reality, misunderstanding of ourselves and our potential role in the cosmos, and of course that non-system view of things, and not getting into the design of the structures, which is what we need to focus on, is at the heart of the failure to really get to what the declarations proclaimed.
But Michael, you and others have been saying that for years now. And that's why you set up the Sustainability Lab, to be able to give us some real life examples of what is possible. I guess my question is that as we're all running around hand-wringing because of the pace of technology, because of the change in geopolitics, because of our inability to actually listen to each other and to negotiate a world that is more sustainable and more resilient for all of us. How do we get there? How do we scale up the work of the lab in such a way that that deals with the urgency of the question right now? I was thinking, as you mentioned, for example, the issue of population and carrying capacity and the importance of migration. In countries like Canada, the issue of migration is such an important one right now, and in North America writ large. So how do we bring to bear both the conceptual underpinning that you put forward, but also the real life experience through the case studies that you've undertaken, with enough urgency and with enough commitment and to really move things along to keep up with the pace of the potential disaster that we have before us?
If I were to propose an approach, a strategy of how to do it, I would say focus not just the lab, but everywhere, everybody. It's everybody's task, first of all. I mean, humans have to begin to understand, individual human, that they have the responsibility to think, not to accept what the social media tell them, what the news tell them, what the governments tell them. They have to think, to discover what it means to think and understand problems, and then showcase in each case what the deeper understanding would mean. On a more institutional level, I would suggest that amplifying and proliferating demonstration cases, like you do in technology, where you do a prototype. Here's one, here's another one, here's another one, could perhaps bring about the groundswell of change. But at the same time, again, I have to emphasize it, and this is why the lab cannot do it alone, and why we are, even if we grow a tip of the iceberg, if you don't deal with the modifying the existing structures, you will not get out of this hole, and that's a very deep challenge for anyone who has been involved in any serious transformation, whether in individual basis, where you own personal growth, whether in a family context or a corporate context or the global context. Second order change, a transformation that require re-engineering the underlying structure in a significant way is very difficult. Why? Because obviously every existing order benefits somebody, and those somebodies will resist the change. And in the case of those structures that we are talking about, those somebodies are extremely, extremely, extremely powerful entities. And they are not only self-reinforcing, but they are producing the next generation to join them. All the business schools with the next CEOs that are indoctrinated in the same mythology of growth at all costs, bring profits and all of those kind of things. So if you don't deal with those, you'll never get anywhere. Now, this is very difficult. It requires an unusual look. It's unprecedented, the kind of challenge that humanity faces now. I know that there have been challenges in the past of major transformation, but they were spread over thousands of years sometimes. The agricultural revolution, the urban revolution, even the industrial revolution. Now we have to operate under within a very small window of opportunity. This is the thing that makes that thing so dangerous and so compelling. We don't have enough time to come together. Now, the only way to look at it with a hopeful sign is sometime major transformation can take a very long time to build up, and then they happen overnight. You understand what I'm saying? Like that's the notion that if algae produce at the lake, it will be year and year and year and year, and then suddenly, before the thing becomes atrophied completely, when they take over, is the last few minutes. The struggle in Syria, for example, is a good example, or the fall of the wall. There's something that builds up tension, takes in Syria. It took what since 2011, a long time, and then the switch happens overnight. And not hope, what I sometimes think from a systemic point of view, this is how change happened. And therefore, I'm encouraged to see the increasing awareness all around the world, especially of young people, who I see that the people who are coming to our program, the GSF that I mentioned before, these are youngsters who could choose what they want to do. They can go anywhere. They can go to be investment bankers. They can go anywhere, but they choose not to participate in the conventional career trajectory. They want to work with other kids of their age collaboratively in order to make a world a better place. Now, of course, they don't have the tools, they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the power, but I think that build-up of that urge, the urge of humanity now, not just of individuals, may produce that switch, hopefully. But we are definitely in a very dangerous point here, that if things don't happen within a certain window, the likelihood of major suffering is there, and it's going to happen to a great extent, as we can see already now, with the prevalence of storms and floods and fires and all the other things that are devastating things. So it's almost like a Greek tragedy here, that humanity there, it has the capacity, innate capacity, it has the best tools already there. They don't have to be invented in terms of technology and science and so forth, but it finds itself difficult to drop the old skin, like a snake that takes the skin off for the next stage. I think this is what we need to do here. And it's very difficult, yes. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I don't have the formula,
Yeah.
other than to say we have to keep trying with everything that we can have.
Elizabeth, if I could try to answer one of the areas that you touched on, in particular with Ontario, there's two things. Number one, you were both talking about the goals that are set, and certainly in the architecture and engineering profession, in the development profession, and I'm sure that you ran across this in Ontario in the time that you spent in Ontario, and our industry tends to set goals with LEED, gold, and platinum, and these goals, and everybody zeroes in on whether your building is a gold or a platinum, and it's a gold, and it's a very mind-setting goal thing that developers and architects and engineers hold as a goal for a building, and it's just the paper thing. It's a chase of points for your building, and that's all that's thought about. What Michael just presented with the 5 areas that Michael, people don't think about that. They literally don't think about, when we're designing buildings and designing cities, about the whole thought of what we're doing from a sustainability point. They think that once they've filled out a form that has points, they've done their job, and there's more to it than that. From the educational perspective, as Michael says, and I hope you do become a MIT, Michael, because you look at our school systems, and we do have a lot of students that are on this program, and they know what I'm speaking of right now. The schools, the universities, certainly the architecture and engineering schools, they zero in on certain areas that each of them, and they're all different. They all teach different subjects and zero in on different things, and they all certainly teach sustainability and climate action courses, but none of them to the same degree that Michael has just presented. And certainly getting that out, getting that message out, and I'm glad we're doing this session right now, because getting that out to them is really important. The associations, the architects and engineering associations, that's another education path, which is really important. And getting this message out to me is extremely important, because people are, as you said, Elizabeth, fragmented, and they're dealing with bits and pieces, but they're not thinking of the holistic avenue when they're dealing with design problems. And they're zeroing in on very small pieces of the design problem without dealing with the entire design problem and what their responsibilities are.
You were one step ahead of me, because my question was going to be, so looking at the audience that we have with us today, it's so important for professional associations and for schools to actually start bringing these new concepts, although perhaps not so new, but in compelling ways. I believe that that we really need to pay attention to governance models, to really think about how it is that, what are the ground rules going to be for how we learn to live together in neighborhoods and in provinces, states, and in countries, let alone the international world. And all it takes is a global pandemic, for example, to be so disruptive to our way of life that it should cause us to think about our interconnectedness. It should cause us to think about ways in which we can actually improve the inequities in our systems. And yet I don't see a lot of evidence that that indeed is the case. I've been struck by a number of architects and engineers who actually talk about design, and a very intentional design, design being not so much a visual practice as a real element of leadership, and a method of I know Bruce Mao, for example, is fond of saying, now that we can do anything, what will we do? And it's that latter question. It's the emphasis on social impact. Science is always going to evolve. That's the nature of who we are as a species. Technology development is amazing, what we can do. But I think so often very little attention comparatively is placed on the social dimension. And Michael would add the social and spiritual dimension. But it is about developing ways of practice in which we can actually take that into account. One need only look now at the rethinking about nuclear, for example, an area where people don't expect to be turned into nuclear engineers and nuclear physicists, but they do want to be listened to. And that's so important for us with any technology, to understand what people value most. What are their deeply held values? Because it's only when we understand that we can actually find common cause and develop some form of good public policy that's going to be owned by society at large. And I don't think we spend nearly enough time in our academic programs. I don't think we have places, and that's places where we can have those kinds of conversations, where we do. One of the elements of our Canadian form of constitutional democracy is that we have these people who represent the crown. And people are often saying, I don't know what it is you do as a royal representative. I think the most important thing that a lieutenant governor is able to do in our system is actually be a place of convening, be a safe space for conversation. And that's where you can bring together people to learn from each other in ways that are not threatening, in ways that allow them to come to their own conclusions about what needs to be followed up on, but without being told what to do. And that's why we've had industry groups in the Lieutenant Governor's suite to talk about net zero, for example. It's why we had researchers working on biodiversity come in to talk to citizens about their latest international evidence of what was happening to our species. I think we have to be much more creative in how we redesign how it is we're going to learn to live together. And in our world, I think we often neglect local governments. We think all of the important decisions get taken at the federal and the provincial levels or the international levels. And yet it's the level of neighborhood, local government where the decisions that matter to you every day in your lives get taken. And that's the level of government that is closest to people. And so if there were anything that I would suggest to professions like those in architecture and engineering, it's to actually pay attention on the ground to what's happening at the level closest to people, rather than necessarily those that are that have these bold ambitions that become very difficult to realize.
I would like, if I may, just to touch on two aspects of what you've been saying, both of you actually. One is on that issue of interactions, integration, and the other one on the issue as distinct from fragmentation, and the other one is on the issue of values and how the two actually connect very nicely in some cases. Remember, the general system theory came out, kind of evolved, exploded on the world in the 70s, came out of biology. Ludwig von Bertalanffy was kind of the system of general system thinking. The father of was a biologist. And his basic insights was to say, you cannot understand a living entity, a biological entity, by focusing on any one of its parts. You cannot study a horse's tail and understand the horse. You need to understand the totality in order to understand horseness. And one important aspect of that insight is the fact that it's interactions that produce synergies. And synergies are qualities of systems that are unpredicted by their components alone. And it's the synergies that are important at the end. What is a society? It's a synergy of all the creativity of all the individuals. That's the whole point. So if you leave out that focus on interaction, understanding a totality, which is what the history of development of the Western scientific way of looking at the world has led us into atomism, linear fragmentation, reductionism. This is not the way to understand complexity. You cannot get to the horse from the tail. You cannot understand the totality if you start with the components. And interestingly enough, while we put a lot of credence and so forth into science, in the conventional way of looking at science, remember that almost all Aboriginal groups around the world, all kind of native societies who displayed a way to live in an environment after hundreds or thousands of years of adaptation, have had an innate holistic interaction with that totality, that they didn't fragment it in the way that we do. So, and if you want to take a very small view of the kind of narrow view of it, because the issue of sustainability, because the issue that are involved here are so complex, the only way to deal with them is by understanding the totality. And this is something that has to be built in not only academically, not only that you are able theoretically to develop a model, it has to be part of you have to think systems automatically, which brings me to the issue of values. At the heart at the heart of everything, I mentioned it earlier, that the four domains, the economic, the social, the whatever, the physical, they're all questions about how you do things. And it's the value domain, the spiritual thing, that determines why you do it in the first place. What is your motivation? Is it to make more money, or is it to make more sustainability? And they're not compatible sometimes. But that value has to drive us. So how, and interestingly enough, it's only sharing values, not academic knowledge. It's sharing values that create a spontaneous integration of peoples and actions. Look at Bhutan, for example, a fantastic example. When the king of Bhutan some years ago came up with that notion of replacing gross national product as a measure to look at gross national happiness, everybody was laughing, ha ha ha, look at those primitive people, they don't understand economics and so forth. Today, everybody's beginning to look at that more seriously. And if you go to Bhutan, you see something that is so impressive. Bhutan is not a country with Buddhism, it's a Buddhist country. And as a result, I mean, it's small enough to act like this also. As a result, from the king down to the last most impoverished peasant, they all share the same spiritual value. So there's no questions. It's the behavior is spontaneous. And what has happened there with the concept of gross national happiness is amazing. It's been developed over the last 15 years, so of the last decade, I would say, into the best metrics that I've seen anywhere around the world to support policymaking. And every single ministry in the government is operating under the same value platform. It's really amazing to see it. Now, how to bring so this is essential. When Liz raises the question, how can we support coming together better and so forth? One of the things that will have to happen is a major transformation in the underlying value that people share. Is it more money in the bank, or is it that notion of well-being that takes care of well-being of other species and all the other things? That's a major transformation, because when you think about the 8.5, whatever the number is now, a billion people on the planet, they are themselves fragmented into so many different ways of looking things and languages and beliefs. It's a true Tower of Babel. And you know what happens to Towers of Babels in the end. They tend to collapse. So I think one important thing is to try and strengthen the foundation of the kind of value that is required in order to drive a sane mode of living and well-being for everybody. We're far from it. And it's not only an academic exercise, that's the point. It's not enough to have courses about ethics in universities. It has to become something that gets to that you get with your mother's milk, so to speak.
Silvio, just one last comment from me, because I know we're rapidly running out of time, and I want to not raise another question that takes up our time. But a very simplistic thought that comes to my mind when I think about architects and engineers, and that has to do with what obligations they have for the very infrastructure of our lives. It is place does matter, where we live and where we work and where we play and where we come together. And the people, it is architects and engineers who actually design all of those kinds of infrastructure for us. And I've always had this differentiation in my mind between a house and a home. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but it seems to me that if we thought more about what it actually takes to create a home, a neighborhood, a province, instead of just the physical infrastructure, there is an emotional, there is a social infrastructure that is just as important. And if I had one last word, it would be to challenge the professions of architecture and engineering to really think about the infrastructure of our lives in a much broader way, and the contribution, if not the obligation, they have to help us make some progress in that way. So
I think sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so with that, let me just say to everybody, although this will be viewed at various times and various places, it is a time when we're all about to celebrate the holiday season, and I would like to end by wishing all of us well during this holiday season. Merry Christmas, and however you wish to celebrate. But it's also a time when it's really appropriate that we think about the very things that Michael has been putting before us for the last couple of hours, and it's a time when I hope we take some quiet time to just reflect on what it is we do and how we can do it, small steps at a time, but in the domains over which we have some authority.
I can't suppress a quick comment. I think what you've just talked about, Liz, is so super important, because it's true for engineers and architects. It's true for almost every other sector and every other profession, also, including officials and governments. So the word that you use that is absolutely critical is obligation. What are the because obligations are not, how shall I say, it's not a negative something that is forced on you. Obligation should be driven by that value that I talked about earlier in respect to Bhutan. Obligation is self-restraint. And self-restraint is what our civilization needs to impose upon itself before it gets out of place altogether. So the obligation can be seen almost like a Hippocrates swear for every profession. Before you run out to build your career and become famous and rich, what are the obligations that you undertake on behalf of humanity, on behalf of the planet and all living beings?
Thank you, Michael. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking you, Elizabeth. Thank you for your words and your challenge to architects and engineers, and as Michael has said, to government officials and anybody that has anything to do that actually touches human beings. And Bucky, as I started this off in 1943, sent out a message, and I think that we're still trying to figure that out and still trying to work on that. Michael, thanks for your presentation. I believe that there were probably everyone that was on this session has not heard of the Sustainability Laboratory, and I think that they've got the message right now, and I'm hoping that they will it will change their lives and how they look at that definition, and what you've delivered today was I think is going to change their lives for sure. So thank you for this presentation. And I want to end off with the hope that this presentation will change not only the guests that we have in our 14 different office locations, our staff, and the students that we have from the universities that are on this session. And I want to sign off today, since this is my last NORRED that I will be doing. And I'm going to ask Jonathan Hughes from our office to come on. So Jonathan.
Wow. Silvio. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jonathan Hughes. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at NORR. 20 years ago, I think it was, Silvio, that we met. I was a principal, and I seem to recall you saying something like, I have a brilliant idea. And I thought, uh-oh. And you described the NORR-Ed and how you felt that it was important. I think there was two things that I recall that you felt was important, not only to educate the employees, and at the time you were in Toronto, I think I was in the Ottawa office, but let's say the Ontario group, but also to give the principals an opportunity to speak and learn a craft of presentation and so forth. And 20 years ago, I believe I did a presentation on the government sector, which is what I was involved in. And 20 years later, I am humbled by Michael Ben-Eli and the Honorable Elizabeth Dowdeswell and what I've just heard today. You've done an incredible job of bringing NORR-Ed along over 18 years. I actually had a chance to try and run it a little bit and to try and keep that momentum going and to improve upon it over the number of years that you have done. It's just absolutely amazing in my mind. We went from groups of, say, 30 or 40 people that would come to the presentations to well over 200, 300, maybe even more on some of the NORR-Eds that we've had. There's been 130 sessions, I think, so 130 speakers that have been organized, not to mention the panels that has come in more recently, and then the 42 YouTube videos that I think you've mentioned that are now forever up on the internet for people to view. So I just want to, on behalf of myself, on behalf of the CEO Brian Gersmar and everyone at NORR, I want to say the deepest thank you to Silvio. It's going to be a heck of a challenge to try and fill the shoes that you have set for us, but the bar is set very high. NORR-Ed will continue. Thank you very, very much, Silvio.
Thank you. And I just want to thank a few people. I'm going to start off with Ilana Dudu, who's been instrumental in setting up the NORR-Ed sessions, Michael McCallum, Christina Mendez de Souza, and Patricia Clark. They were part of my NORR-Ed team, and thank you to all of you. And once again, Michael Ben-Eli and the Honorable Elizabeth Dowdeswell, thank you for being my last NORR-Ed. And as I said earlier, I know that this one, coupled with the last one, will make a difference. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you, Liz, for joining in this, and thank you all the people that are there.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.